Hello and welcome to the Moviescramble podcast. You find us today in this rather dull, windy, blowy, miserable, typical Scottish summer, which is not unusual for ourselves. Joining me today on the pod is a woman who I've long considered may be a deep cover spy, basically because I think she must have excellent tradecraft because she has this persona that makes her seem very outgoing and very open, which is the totally opposite of what you would think a spy would be. And anytime that you ask her anything that's even remotely personal, she says, "Black bag, sweetie, black bag." Mary, how the hell are you doing?
Now, interestingly, I thought you were going to describe me as an amateur, which would have been
No.
I am very well. Looking forward to a brief break in the sun, and just counting down the days for that. But also looking forward to chatting film with you, of course.
Nice one. Yes, a little extended period away from the norm is always nice, and if you get a wee bit of sun as well. But obviously, factor 50, darling. Factor 50.
Oh, of course.
Yep. Not everybody's like your little Spanish beau who can just go out in bronze easily. So yeah.
Oh, he's so brown already before we go. It's ridiculous. I've actually banned him from going outside from now until we go on holiday because I was like, no more sun for you, only darkness.
When he did that aging picture, it was like
yes.
Is it Ezzy Morales? There was a wee hint of that as the older gentleman with
the
greying in the temples and all that. Yeah, I could see that happening.
I'd be happy with that. I'd be happy.
I bet you would, yeah. So, getting back to the business in hand, we are talking spy films today, if you didn't realise that from my convoluted opening. We are going to be talking about two recent spy films which came out in 2025. Later on, we will be talking about Steven Soderbergh's Black Bag. But to start off, we are going to be talking about The Amateur, which came out in April, I believe, this year.
You ever wonder what they do with all the stuff you dig up for them?
That's not my job.
No, but you never wonder?
No, it's the CIA. I gotta trust that they'll make the right call. Maybe it's better not to know.
Love you.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Charlie, I think you need to see this.
What is this?
Your wife has been killed. What you do is very important to what we do. Let us handle this.
I want mission-specific training, cash, and a new identity.
Have you lost your mind?
I want to find and kill the people who murdered my wife.
I don't think you could beat a 90-year-old nun in an arm wrestling match.
I want to face my wife's killers, look them in the eyes, and balance the scales.
The film is a remake of a 1981 film of the same name. It was written by Robert Little, who wrote the screenplay for the first film and then turned it into a book. He is a novelist and a screenwriter. And this film, I believe, was reasonably successful in terms of 1980s spy thrillers at the time. And it has been remade and updated for the modern age. The film is directed by James Hawes. It stars Remi Malek, Rachel Brosnahan, Catriona Balfe, Michael Stuhlbarg, Lawrence Fishburne, and John Bernthal in various levels of involvement in the film, which we will no doubt talk about. The story itself is an employee of the CIA. He's a decoder, a cryptographer, whose wife is it's not really, you're not really told what kind of business she's in, but she is away on a business trip in London and she is killed in a terrorist attack. And with his skills, he is able to piece together who actually did it. And when he takes this to his CIA bosses, he finds out that they knew who actually did it, but have decided that they are not going to go after the people responsible because they want the whole network, and they don't want to jeopardize that by just taking out a couple of lower level players in this network. Charlie, understandably, is not pleased about this. He is more interested in getting not so much revenge, but he wants reparations for the crime that was committed, just because he wants to make sure that his wife did not die in vain. So he takes it upon himself, with the help of a bit of training within the CIA, to go and find these people and exact justice to them. Now, the title of the film gives it away in that he is an amateur at this. He is not a CIA operative. He is somebody who sits behind a desk and works with his head and works with figures and works with computers. And so the story goes from there as the amateur goes out into the world and tries to get the revenge that he so needs in order to find closure for this. Now, Mary, did you know anything about this film? It had a short cinema release. It was only there maybe for about 3 weeks. Did you know anything about the background to the film? Had you seen any trailers or anything? And once you knew about it, what were your expectations?
No, do you know, I had not heard a thing about this until you mentioned it. And I'm surprised because it's got quite a big cast, as you just said, you know, some of the names there, you know, are really sort of well known. So I'm surprised that I didn't hear more about it, didn't know it was in cinemas, didn't see a trailer for it. So went in completely blind. However, I kind of expected sort of like your typical kind of standard spy fare, maybe sort of John le Carré-esque kind of story. Obviously, you know, once it starts and you realise that he obviously works in sort of data, I was expecting lots of hacking scenes with keyboards and things popping up on computer screens and all that sort of thing. But having seen it, I really wish I'd seen it in the cinema, because I thought it was a really, really good film, and actually something a little bit different. And I'm sure we'll talk about sort of why that is. But I'm disappointed that I didn't know more about it, because it's one I would have happily gone along to see.
I think the only thing I knew about it was when I saw the trailer for the film. It was being trailed like December, January time. So it was getting trailed during all of these award contenders and things like that. So they were all coming out around about the same time and everything as well. And I was intrigued by it because I do like a good spy film, sometimes even a bad spy film. I'll sit and watch quite happily as well. I've not got such discerning taste in that way, but it looked kind of intriguing, and it looked like something that had a decent cast in it, which is always a good thing with a spy film. So my expectations were like, oh, this could be quite good, you know, I could quite enjoy it. So in terms of the film itself, let's talk about the main performance. Now, you have Remi Malek off the back of being Freddie Mercury. He was obviously in a crypto type show before. He was in Mr. Robot. So he's got a background in doing a big film and also doing sort of the TV sort of stuff as well. How did you think he was in this main role?
So I thought he was thoroughly engaging in this performance as Charlie Hayler. I think that we get a real understanding of who he is, like, very quickly. Like, the film opens with that sort of like normal domestic setup. He's tinkering away in the garage. His wife, Sarah, played by Rachel Brosnahan, is headed to London for a work trip. And he's like a suit and tie guy. And he's wearing glasses, so you know he's smart. Hollywood still hasn't got rid of that particular trope. But we see where he works. You know, he's 5 floors under the ground. It's a dark room. He's sort of reserved. He's introverted. He doesn't really sit with the cool kids at lunch. You know, John Bernthal's over at a separate table, whereas he sits with the sort of geeks and the coders. And we understand that he is like a thinker. You know, the way he actually tracks people down in order to sort of find out who killed his wife or who was responsible for the terror attack. He's obviously very like methodical and analytical. But as the film progresses, he does get increasingly batshit. There's some very interesting death scenes or torture scenes in this film that I'm like, and you were sort of willing him on to do it, because as I say, he is like a shirt and tie guy. But I thought he really carried this film. I thought he was interesting. I liked the way his brain worked and the fact that we got to see how his brain actually works. And you definitely felt his grief and desperation. You know, he was met with a sort of like wall of silence from the higher-ups. You've got Julianne Nicholson and Holt McCallany as the 2 directors that he's sort of butting heads with. And they're just giving him sort of the party line. And you can really feel how desperate he is to prove that he's not just a desk guy, that he will sort of avenge his wife. In a way, it reminded me of Mads Mikkelsen in Riders of Justice, when he sort of tracks down the guys that obviously do the subway explosion and that kills his wife. So yeah, I thought he was great. I thought he was really interesting in terms of character development, because as the title alludes to, he is not skilled in this particular CIA field work. but he just goes for it. And I thought, yeah, really believable, really, really interesting.
Yes, I liked the way that the character was introduced. Like I say, he's in his garage, he's working on a plane, he's working on a Cessna. And before you even hear anything come out of his mouth, you know he's methodical because he has all the parts laid out on the ground and it's all kind of neat. He knows exactly what he's doing with it and everything. And then when his wife comes out and says, "Oh, I thought I'd find you here," he's like, yeah. So he's really interested in it. And then the scene after that is he's making his wife coffee before she goes away. She likes his coffee. And he's very methodical about the way he makes the coffee and everything. So it's all very measured. He knows what he's doing. And it also introduces the fact that he doesn't like to travel because she says, "Come with me. Why don't you come with me?" "Oh, no." And she says, "Well, you never travel anywhere," because his world is kind of insular in that way. It's very ordered. He has an ordered home life and he's an ordered work life, and he doesn't need this travel aspect or to broaden his horizons, if you know, because it kind of scares him. So he's, in a lot of ways, he is an amateur to begin with as well. Obviously, he's very professional what he does, but in terms of like sort of social skills and the need to actually expand his horizons, he's not interested in that. It is very different to him. So yes, I'd like that. And I like the way that the character progressed through the film. And like you say, he obviously changed with everything that was going on, but that was all, there was like foreshadowing of everything because he was told when he suggested, right, I go undercover and look, go and get these guys. Hope McCallany said, "You've got no chance. It's not you. You cannot do this. You're not that type of person." Everybody that he met said, "You are not that type of person. You're not somebody who can go out there." When he was getting trained, he was told exactly the same thing. And there was a couple of scenes that kind of bookend the film about using a gun close up. So, and that was highlighted as well, how anything to do with like killing and everything, it takes away part of you while you're doing it. And you could see that happening in the fact that he was changing throughout the film as well. So I felt it was like a good character, the character development, but the way that Remi Malek actually brought that to the screen because of his sort of unusual looks. His eyes are very big. He always looked kind of frightened. He always looked kind of freaked out, you know, and he didn't look at ease at any point. Like you say, he's very ordered. He knows what he's doing in certain aspects, but so much of what he was doing, he didn't know. And it looked as if he was just kind of frightened all the time. There was no point in that film where he looked as if he was comfortable in what he was doing, because it was so alien to him, everything about it. I suppose maybe the sort of initial work scenes and all that were sort of more in his comfort zone. But even then, he was, like say, he was a geek, he was an outsider. He wasn't like friends with the bear or anything like that. So that was quite good. So the supporting cast in this, now I have questions about the supporting cast. We have Lawrence Fishburne, Rachel Brosnahan, and John Bernthal. Together, they have about 15 minutes of screen time between them, not just individually. What the actual fuck? What's going on there?
It seems mad, but actually, in a way, it works because Rachel Brosnahan's character obviously is introduced in the very opening scenes, and then we get a couple of flashbacks when Charlie is either looking at CCTV or he's just reminiscing about time spent with his wife. But I actually feel that was okay. Like I feel like had they gone down the route of him constantly reminiscing about her or dreaming about her, it would have been overkill and it would have made the film seem really saccharine, whereas actually we were so focused on his journey, if you want to call it that in inverted commas, that felt like the right amount of screen time for that particular character. John Bernthal, like, I don't really know why he was in this film, if I'm being honest. There's like 2 minutes worth of stuff. And Holt McCallany does seem to get himself these roles where he has like a senior position within an organisation, but we don't really see him for most of the film, so that was kind of to be expected. Lawrence Fishburne, again, his character's there as a sort of catalyst for the next stage of Rami Malek's journey in this film, to use that horrible cliche again. So, and the scenes that we do have with him, though, are quite critical because, as you've mentioned, you know, he loads a gun and puts it in Charlie's hand and he's like, no, look at me, and point the trigger, you know, point the gun right between my eyes. And he's like, you know, look at me when you're doing this. And obviously Charlie's hand is shaking, like not just with the weight of the gun, but because he's, you know, got this in his hand. So for me, it's interesting how these characters sort of come in and out of his life, but really it's the Rami Malek show, and we're following him across all these different locations. I like the fact that Lawrence Fishburne shows up in Marseille and everything's like grimy and dirty and sweaty, and we're in this sort of like dive bar and it's all strobe lights, and you're like, yeah, this is where this character would lurk, sort of like in the shadows somewhere slightly dodgy. So I felt like, yes, there's not a lot of screen time there, but really you are sort of more interested in working out how Charlie's going to wrap this all up. So yeah, it's obviously big names and they're sort of relegated to, as you've said, less than sort of 15 minutes on screen, but it does somehow work.
Yes, it works in terms of the story, but what I don't, well, I think it's kind of misdirection as well, because you're expecting certain things. Because we watch so many films, there are certain tropes, spy tropes.
Yeah.
So one of them is his wife really dead? So,
yes.
And if you put somebody like Rachel Brosnahan, who has been massive this summer, in a film like that, in a support, and she's like second build in the film, so it's not as if she's like sort of buried within, because there's people in this film who've got a lot more screen time than her that do not get the same billing as her. So there's always that thought, especially with one that's a sort of digital type film. You know, they can alter video and all this sort of stuff. Could that possibly
that thought did cross my mind a few times, that maybe the footage was rigged, or she was somehow going to come back. Yeah, that did cross my mind a few times, as you said, because her billing was so high. Yeah,
because you don't see like a funeral or anything like that, or him standing at the airport waiting for the body to come plane, all that sort of stuff. So
although you do see that, you do see a body come off the plane, because my note is, why the hell is she in a cardboard box? Because it's not like she's even given anything sort of dignified coming off the plane. And part of me is like, well, has he checked what's in there? Does he know that is definitely her? There was moments where I was like, this could all be a setup. This could all be either to set him up because they don't trust them, or the images have been altered some way. So yeah, all those thoughts were going through my head definitely as I was watching it.
Yeah, and with the character of the bear played by John Bernthal, you expected him to be involved in the third act in a way, and without really giving anything away, it doesn't happen. My other thoughts is that it's subtle character building for future installments as well.
Probably not a bad shout as well. I did expect John Bernthal to somehow betray him or something, because again, because there was that dynamic set up really early on, that, you know, Charlie sat with the fellow decryptors at one table and the bear was almost too cool and he sat at a different table. I was like, well, why is he hanging out with him and chatting to him? This must be part of a bigger setup. So you're right, it could just be world building.
Because the whole thing with his relationship, with Charlie's relationship with the bear, because he says, oh, you know, how do you know him? And he says, I saved his life. And they don't ever
they don't even talk about it.
They just accept it, because obviously he can say that, but he can't really say anything else, because obviously it would be operational detail that would probably be discussing in an open forum like in a canteen. So yeah, I probably couldn't. But yes, I did kind of like that, the fact that they had this link as well, but it seemed to be very one-sided, because he was wanting like computer support and things like that, all that kind of stuff. So yes, I did enjoy the fact that there was small roles and there was well-known people in it, because it throws you off a little bit as well. So what did you think, like following on from that, these sort of small, almost cameo roles, what did you think of the overall story and the pacing of it, how it came together? You're talking about a 2-hour film here, so it's not massive runtime. It's quite a lot to get into that 2 hours. Do you think it worked? Do you think the pacing was good? Do you think the transitions between the various elements of the film worked well?
Yeah, do you know, that's one of the notes that I have, is that this is so well paced. And actually, I usually find it quite annoying when a film jumps from location to location, because it feels like they're just trying to show off, like, oh look, we filmed in Istanbul, or we filmed in Svalbard or somewhere like that. Whereas it is actually essential to the plot here that he tracks these people down and he moves from place to place. I loved, as I said, the character development. I loved even just those small moments where you got to follow Charlie's process. So see when he's like dissecting the photographs and he's like, well, this reflection is on this window and the sun is in this direction and the land is flat, which means it has to be a vineyard in this specific location. Like, I found all of that really, really interesting. Like the maps, the data, the sort of the tracking, I found all of that really, really fascinating. So I think for 2 hours, it absolutely flies in, because you know that, and essentially he's there to pick off a certain amount of people, or at least track them down, right? So he knows where they are, so he can pass that information on. So you kind of know there is an end point to all of this. So I think they really make the most of, he's now in this city doing this, or he's tracking down this person. And as I've said, there's some really inventive death and torture scenes in this, which absolutely I was like, this is fucking brilliant. I've never seen this done before. This is really cool. So I thought it flew in. I thought it was 2 hours well spent.
Oh yeah, definitely, I would agree with you in that. I like the fact that there are no stupid characters doing stupid things, because we're so used to clever people doing stupid things, or somebody who is an expert marksman and can't hit somebody who's 12 feet away from them. That kind of idea. You know, that you get that so much in a film as a shorthand way to end something. And you didn't have that. Every single person in this film was clever. They were there because they were clever. They weren't there because they were like political appointees or whatever. Everybody knew what they were doing. The bad guys were bad guys. They didn't take risks. They didn't do stupid things. The only one was, I think it was the guy who had an extravagant lifestyle.
Yes,
that was the only thing. And he was
that's
kind of the playboy.
That's how he get caught out, yeah.
Yes, yeah. But even then, you see that so many times in like real life. People have this sort of playboy lifestyle, and they're well known for having sort of dodgy pasts, you know, especially with dictators and sons of dictators and all this sort of stuff. So it didn't feel out of place, any of this, and nobody did anything stupid at any point. It was just that Charlie was smarter, and he also was lucky with some things as well, because like some of the deaths, especially the first one, it wasn't actually him. He caused it, but it wasn't his hand, because he was having problems and he couldn't go through with it. So, and that feeds back into the whole amateur thing as well, which I found to be really good, really like. You mentioned briefly about the locations. So we're talking about the sort of Washington area, we're talking about Paris, Istanbul, the Baltic Sea as well. What did you think of the fact, and of course Marseille, what did you think about the fact that most of these places look like shitholes rather than glamorous spy locations?
But I feel like, again, that's so appropriate, because like we are used to obviously like the James Bond version of locations, which of course has him in like a crisp suit driving an amazing car in the blistering sunshine. But it's actually a lot of spy work is probably quite mundane and on the very unglamorous side of these cities. It probably will be hanging around pub toilets in Marseille to try and catch a glimpse of someone, you know. So I really like the fact that this was not a glamorous film. Like colour palette wise, it is quite muted, it is quite grey in general. So it's not going to be this sort of like glossy high life. It's not there to sort of advertise, oh, come and be a spy, because, you know, you'll be in Istanbul one day and then, you know, Marseille the next. It's kind of showing you that a lot of this work is sort of down and dirty, and I actually really like that notion of it.
Yes, I do think it works well. Like you say, like a bar toilet in Marseille is not the most glamorous of locations, but it does certainly work, I think, because you think it would be more realistic in that we don't know, you know, all these things are made up. It's stories and everything, so you don't know what's actually involved in it. So it does kind of make sense and everything as well. So yes, I did like that. I did think it was particularly good in that sort of respect. Now, underpinning all the visuals and everything is the usual, the soundtrack, the music. Did you have an opinion on that? What did you think about that?
I don't think I've actually got any. Oh yeah, I have the score. Whatever it is, the score is tight. There's a lot of like kind of what I would call like pulse-like strings used throughout, obviously to try and make you aware of like pace and time and that kind of like fluttery heart moment that you should have because something really bad's about to happen. But I did think it obviously contributed really well to the actual pace of the film itself. But just as it was something a bit sort of different. It wasn't like your usual sort of bombastic, over the top kind of like, or equally it could have gone down the sort of like digital techno sounding score, because obviously he's a hacker and we could have had lots of keyboard strokes as part of the score, but it was quite classic, quite simple, but also like made you feel like your heart was kind of fluttery when it was supposed to.
Yeah, I felt it was more of a traditional sort of score in that respect because there was strings and everything. There was various elements of sort of like drums and synths and things like that. So it wasn't just like that, but it did feel kind of a traditional role, traditional sort of soundtrack in that sort of respect. And I liked it. I thought it was good. It didn't particularly stand out in any way, which again, you don't necessarily need that to happen all the time because it's in service of the story as well, which was good. Without giving too much away, Charlie has two women in his life. Obviously his wife who dies, and there is another one who's part of the story. Now, did you get a wee sort of white saviour vibe, white male saviour vibe going on here with the fact that what drives him is the fact that it's a woman that has died?
Yeah, I did think it was out of all, because I did really, really enjoy this film, but I did find it slightly cliched that it's the death of his wife that's the catalyst for all of this action, because we've obviously seen that a million times over. But I feel like it just about gets away with it again because like the use of the flashback is sparing, so it doesn't become sort of like saccharine. And then obviously you've got, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this, Incoline, played by Catriona Balfe with a very strange accent that I'm not sure was Turkish, but there we go. And she's Charlie's sort of like an honest liaison who's been leaving him all these kind of tips and hints up until this point. And they work together using her sort of like local, like boots on the ground knowledge with his sort of overall sort of CIA access, all that sort of thing. So it was interesting that he did kind of find himself partnered with her because his assumption, like I assume most people watching this, was that this was another guy that he was talking to. So it was kind of a slight reveal that obviously it was another woman, but she was an interesting character in that she had inherited that position from her husband as well, who was the initial contact. So again, there was a kind of like, obviously she had taken it over after his death, whereas Charlie was going out after his wife's death. So there was a wee bit of kind of swapping of their circumstances, as it were, and that's why they sort of partnered well together. But yeah, I did find the initial sort of starting block a little bit, we've seen this before, you know, guy's wife dies, guy goes mad, you know, how's this all going to sort of pan out? But again, I just really enjoyed this film. Like I feel bad saying bad things about it because I did have such a good time watching it. You kind of forgive it its sins because you are invested in this story. Yeah.
What did you think about the use of YouTube as well in helping?
I loved that. That was so funny. Like I wrote that down. I can't believe that he used a YouTube tutorial to pick a lock. First of all, how are those tutorials allowed to be on YouTube? Because surely everyone could just go about picking locks. But I thought it made complete sense that that's what that character would do. He wasn't sure how to do it. He's got a phone in his pocket. So just use the knowledge that's on the phone. Like it just made complete sense for his character. But also, yeah, genuinely hysterical because if I don't know how to do anything, I'm like, I'll just YouTube it. I've not learned how to pick locks that way, though.
I'm glad they only used it once though, rather than going back.
It would have lost its charm if they'd done it again and again. For sure.
It's important not to repeat yourself in these type of films because especially when it's setting up with one scene and then another, and it's like he's trying to get to people, so there has to be a certain variety in how they do that. Do you think they achieved that in this film with the sort of variety, not so much of the kills, but the lead up to it and how they actually went about their business?
Yeah, definitely. I think you got a really strong sense of who each character was that he was going after, which always helps in these sort of circumstances. You had variety of location as well, which obviously, again, makes a difference. And I think the fact that when, you know, we first see him like in that stairwell in Paris, like the gun makes him visibly queasy. And, you know, for his first attempt, he can't shoot. He absolutely just bottles it. And from there on out, we see him taking routes to kills that are still personal because he's still there watching it happen, but he's not physically having to like pull a trigger in somebody's head. So that variety of the different types of kills as well does really draw you in. I think it's a film that thrives on the fact that he is moving between different places, but also tracking down different people. And in amongst all of this, you've got his sort of personal growth as a character. Like you can see that it's becoming less of a chore for him to basically pick these people off, which in itself is obviously very interesting character development. But I honestly, like the pacing and the variety in it is absolutely brilliant. As I say, for 2 hours, I could have easily sat and watched more of this. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, I do like the fact that even though the character Charlie is developing and he's getting slightly better at what he does, the pivotal scene with the bear in the wee sort of cafe, he is petrified because he thinks somebody's going to kill him right there and then. It may not be the bear, it may be somebody who's with him, and he's been completely set up. And it just showed that no matter how much preparation that he actually does, there are these elements that are completely out of his control, and it terrifies him. He just does not know what's around the corner. So he is almost in a sort of state of tension all the time. And he's scared, and you can see that. And you see that right until the very end of the film as well. So without giving anything away, do you think it had a good ending?
I was surprised by the ending. Again, so I feel like this is a film that properly keeps you on your toes in the sense of you don't quite know where it's going to go. Obviously, I've not seen the original film, nor have I read the book, so I didn't know how this was going to end up. So I thought it was really interesting because there's a line, this is what I came here for, to balance the scales. So there's this notion of justice that sort of pervades the whole film. And I was quite shocked about how things ended. I was pleased to see Michael Stuhlbarg as a master villain because I love him. I would watch him in anything. I think he's brilliant. And the dynamic between him and Rami Malek is obviously very interesting. It's very charged. It's very suspenseful. That you just don't know how this is going to end. But yeah, I feel like Charlie's character probably feels like he's got the ultimate revenge. But I was just very surprised about how things sort of wrapped up.
Yep, I was in the same position as you. I hadn't seen the first film. I think the book is really hard to get. I don't think, for some reason, it hasn't been reprinted to tie it in with the film.
You would think, they usually do like a film front cover and stuff like that,
Yeah, because I did have a look for it, and the only sort of copies were like old second-hand copies, and they're like 14, 50 quid to actually buy one of them. So there was no way I was obviously going to spend that amount of money on something like that. I've got a drug habit to support. I can't be doing that. So yes, I was in the same position. I didn't know anything about how the original one ended. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the chances are the 2025 film will be radically different because they'll change so many things. It's the core of the story, I think, is the same. Somebody works for the CIA, wife dies, goes after the people. Now, a 1981 film, I suspect, may end slightly differently. I will seek out the 81 film in order to find that out for myself, but I don't think it really would inform the ending of this film. And I was surprised at the ending of the film because it did not go the way I thought, basically because I've seen too many spy films. I kind of think, I know what's going to happen here, but it was a surprise, and I think I enjoyed it more because of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. So. I think because there is so many red herrings in this film, as we've said, with such big names in the cast, you're expecting a very different film from what you get. And I think that's probably part of the enjoyment factor, is that I felt like I'd seen something quite fresh having watched this.
Yeah, because there's a tiny wee element to this when Charlie gets his wife's belongings back, and she'd bought him a gift, and it was like a wee puzzle.
Yeah.
And then he takes that with him, and he manages to open it up, and there's a message inside about, taking flight, getting out there. And then he loses it. He gets attacked, and it gets dropped, and you think, well, what's the significance of that? You kind of think, is there something in there? Like because there was a wee hidden compartment inside the puzzle. Is there going to be something in there? Is it going to be nerve gas? Ooh, something like that.
Yeah.
Which, and it doesn't work out that way. And there's lots of wee bits in there that you think, is he going to get? But like, for instance, he can't shoot properly, even when he's really close to a target. It's a terrible shot. So you think, well, is he suddenly going to turn around and be able to shoot properly? And then they'll have this wee sort of half-minute montage of him out in a field shooting at bottles or something, that kind of thing, until he gets it right. But you don't get that, and it's always these wee things that keep you on edge, because you don't know. You get glimpses of what he's seeing, like when he's researching stuff about the Baltic Sea and all this sort of stuff. So you get wee glimpses, but it's nothing concrete. It's not really enough to give you an idea of where the story might go. And I thought, it makes sense. You're seeing it with him, but you're not inside his head at the same time. He is a couple of steps ahead of basically everybody in the film. But
Yeah.
like I say, at the same time, only in his field of expertise. Outside of that, nah, he is a complete amateur. He's totally. So, given all that, would you recommend this movie?
Oh, absolutely! Like genuinely, I finished watching it, and because Chris, I think he was upstairs, and I was like, "You need to see this film." I was like, "It's so good." I was like, I said it'll be right up your street. I said, "There's good kills, lots of like interesting." As I say, I love that these scenes where he's like picking apart all the photographs and stuff like that. I think it's so well paced, really well cast, and I'm completely surprised that this just. I've never even heard of it. Like I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would heartily recommend it to anyone who's looking for a really fresh approach to a genre that we're all, not fatigued with. I'm not going to say that, but just more than familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes, I would thoroughly recommend this as well. I think it's a very, very good spy drama, and it tries to do something a little different. And in doing so, it keeps you entertained for the whole 2-hour run period.
Yeah.
As I say, the film was in cinemas. It is now on Disney Plus for your delectation. Just look under the star banner in Disney Plus and you will find it there. Please do seek it out. It's definitely worth it.
I will just add just one thing. Torture by pollen is my worst fucking nightmare. I'm the sleaziest person known to mankind. And I was like, wow, imagine doing that to another person. That was cruel on a whole other level.
Yeah. And effective.
Yes.
So if your nemesis is listening to this podcast, then they know exactly how to get
to
you.
Okay. I've already asked Chris if he really gets mad with me and he wants to bump me off, could he do it with arsenic? Because apparently that tastes like almond, like a cherry bakewell, like a frangipane. So I would be really happy with that. I'd be good with that.
Yeah, apart from the fact I don't think you can have frangipane anymore. So.
No.
There would be something suspicious before you even took your first taste. wait, I can't eat this.
Yeah. Are you going to kill me? Is that what's happening?
Yeah. Okay. Moving on from there, we are now going to be talking about our second film of the day. Another spy film from 2025. This is Black Bag from the director Steven Soderbergh.
Where are you off to?
Black bag.
Right. You asked how it works. To be with someone in this business, this is how. You each know what you know, and you know what you'll do, and you never discuss certain things again. I watch her, I assume she watches me. I would do anything for you.
Oh, do you?
Yes.
If a situation presents itself, would you choose your marriage over everything else?
My devotion to my marriage is my professional weakness. Love you.
This film, again, star-studded cast. We have Michael Fassbender, Kate Blanchett, Naomi Harris, Renée Jean Page, Pierce Brosnan, Tom Burke, and Marissa Abela in a drama that can be pretty much described as a tight 90-minute people in rooms talking about things drama. The background to this film, which was written by David Coate, he started writing this when he was doing the screenwriting for Mission Impossible in 1996. He had the idea for it then because he'd been talking to various spy services and getting background on techniques and how they basically operate and stuff. And it's taken this long, not through like writer's block or anything, but because he's a busy boy. Just look up his filmography. He's been involved in an awful lot of stuff since then. So the story is there is a mole within the organization. The organization being, it's like a digital crypto organization as part of GCHQ. And it's come to light that a device, which is a sort of malware device. You don't really know very much about it. It's almost like the MacGuffin in this, called Severus, which has been stolen and sold to a bad actor, if you like, a third party who's... The intent of it is to actually affect nuclear power plants. You get wee snippets of that through the story. But that is not important. That is not the important thing here. The important thing here is that there's somebody who has actually done this. Now, the main character in this, played by Michael Fassbender. George is the person that you go to when you want to find out who is lying. He is very, very good at it. He's described as being like a human lie detector. So he has been told that there is a leak, there is a mole, and he has to find it. A list has been compiled of the 5 people that it's most likely to be, and he has to figure out from there. Complication is one of the 5 people is his wife. In an unusual situation, he is happily married to another spy, which makes it very, very difficult. And the other people that are involved in the investigation all work within the same office, but are very, very different types of people and very, very different professions within the organization as well. So initially, George sets up a dinner.
A dinner party from hell.
Yeah, to speak to people, and the drama and the small amount of action goes from there. As I say, very short runtime, 90 minutes. Doesn't hang about an awful lot. Did you have any preconceptions about this one? Did you know about it?
Yeah, so I definitely wanted to see this film because I saw the trailers in the cinema. I saw that Gustav Skarsgård was in it, which was a draw in itself. And it just looked like a really sort of cool spy thriller with lots of tension. I would say it's a very different film to the one we just discussed, and I will admit that I didn't enjoy it as much, but it's a sort of classic British drama, I guess you could say. I feel like it feels very, very British. But yes, no, I definitely had heard of it. And with the cast that's involved, obviously I had very high expectations going in. I mean, Cate Blanchett is pretty much phenomenal in everything that she does. And obviously Michael Fassbender does a very good sort of, as we talked about in The Killer, he's very good at playing that sort of detached, cold, icy machine that he tends to do very well. So yeah, I was looking forward to it.
Good. Yeah, I was definitely looking forward to it. It's the kind of film that I lap up. It's just, I love these films where it's interesting people talking about interesting things in a room, which is pretty much this film. That, fair enough, yeah, there are various locations where they're talking. It's not always in a room, but that's basically what it is. It's almost like a play in that sort of respect, in terms of it doesn't have the need for action scenes or locations or anything like that. So yes, I was very interested in it. So the story itself, did that grab you, or was it a bit of a struggle to get into, or what?
Oh no, I definitely think from the offset the setup is clear. You know, George has to work out whether or not his wife is the mole, and I think even that as a premise is just really interesting. Never mind the fact that he's researching all these other people. You know, we find out really quickly that, for example, he has exposed his father's own infidelities, which caused obviously a lot of upset in his own family. But he's someone who he says repeatedly, I don't like liars, and that's very clear sort of from the offset that, you know, his moral compass is stronger than anything else. Now, you do have the trickiness of, would he be willing to expose his own wife? Because he does say, like, I would kill for you. And, you know, he asks her, like, would you lie to me? And she's like, oh, only if I had to, and all this sort of thing. So there's a very interesting dynamic there from the offset. How do 2 spies sort of conduct their work and have this domestic setup as well, where they can't actually talk about anything? So yeah, no, I was definitely hooked from the offset. I think it's a very, very clever setup, because usually, like, when you think of, for example, like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and it's the Find the Mole setup again. Now, that's a brilliant film, and I absolutely love that, all the various performances in that. But this is a slightly different setup, because it's not just find the mole, it's can you trust your wife, and has your wife been lying to you for all the time you've been living together? So it adds that kind of edge to it that maybe other spy films don't quite have.
Yes, I did like it in that respect, the fact that the story was laid out very quickly. You knew where you were within the first 2 minutes, I would say. You knew, you had an idea of the main character of George, what he was like, and the task at hand, as in, you know, begin the mole hunt. And that was it from there. Everything else followed on from it. It didn't need to be convoluted. It didn't need to have stuff coming in from the side and all that. It was a nice wee sort of self-contained story, which I really, really enjoyed. I thought that was refreshing to have something like that. So main performances here, Michael Fassbender, Cate Blanchett.
Yes, I mean, Fassbender is brilliant in this. As I say, I really like him when he's doing that whole sort of like cold, dead-eyed stare that he's so good at, and he is very forceful in this. Like from the minute he sits down to, as I've said, the dinner party from hell, you can tell that he is in control of that room. He's in control of that conversation, and as I say, it's revealed that he surveilled his own dad. So it makes you think, well, if he would do it to his dad, he probably would do it to his wife, and he probably would do it to all of his friends. This is just a job to him, and he's performing his job to the best of his abilities. He's got that sort of like clipped, plummy English accent that obviously suggests that he's come from sort of the upper echelons of society, where maybe there's a history of working in this particular type of work, because that tends to be where they sort of draw their people from. And in very key scenes, which I'm sure we'll come on to talk about, like for example, the sort of one-to-one lie detector setup, he is so calm and so unblinking, like to the extent where there's a couple of times when I was watching him and I was like, it doesn't even look like he's breathing. He holds himself so completely still. So I think it's a really strong performance. And in contrast to that, Cate Blanchett's Catherine seems like, I don't want to say flighty because that's not fair, but she does seem more sort of like effervescent, like she dresses a little bit more like stylishly and more colourful than him. She seems to be sort of well liked amongst her colleagues, whereas you don't get the impression that anyone really likes him, interestingly enough. You get the impression that he's kind of the outlier in their group, and she seems a lot more confident and gregarious around people. Like she goes to drops, she goes to meetups, and she can handle herself as well. So they are quite an interesting couple in terms of their dynamic. And of course, within the opening scenes, like once he's obviously got the news from Philip Meacham that his wife might be a mole, you actually see a very domestic setup, and he's the one doing all the cooking, whereas she's trying on different types of earrings to see what will suit the dinner party. So yeah, their dynamic is established really quickly, and it's a very interesting one as well, given that they do quite similar jobs. He is like what you would imagine a sort of stone cold killer is like, whereas she seems almost too personable to be in that particular line of work.
Yes, I like the fact that even though George is this very deliberate type of character, in the relationship with his wife, he is second best. He does defer to her in a lot of ways. He, like I say, he's more the domesticated animal in this relationship. Yeah. He does all the chores and he does all the cooking, and he arranges, like, oh, you want to go to the pictures? I thought we'd do this, thought we'd do that. And it's all to do with her schedule. His schedule is set. He goes to the office, he goes to the lake, go fishing, comes back home, whereas she's like off for 3 or 4 days at a time, that kind of idea. She's more upfront. Like I say, there's a lot to the character of Catherine because she has to project this image. It's hard enough for women in any sort of profession, but I would imagine spy service, it's tougher. Again, it's another level up where you're having to prove yourself, which I found interesting because it was like 3 and 3. There was 3 men and 3 women.
Yes, their social circle,
yeah. So that kind of was interesting as well. But I liked their dynamic and the way that they, at first, they've obviously decided to have a long-term relationship and what that actually entails. And there's things that they can and cannot talk about. And there's things that they want to share. And there's things that they know are just completely off limits because of the job. And it's actually life and death because if something goes wrong, like something here, if something has disappeared like this Cerberus unit, then that could be life and death for tens of thousands of people, and that will reflect back on the people who are actually involved in it. So if she's involved in it, it's the end of everything as far as he's concerned, because it's the end of his relationship and possibly the end of his career as well, because he would be implicated. What does he know? Because it's, and like they say a number of times during the film, it's very difficult to have a relationship when you are working in the service because it's just so easy to lie. So having that level of truth and committing yourself to somebody is very unusual, and it makes such a strong central pairing here as well.
Because I'm pretty sure, I think it might be the character of George that says, like, these are all professional liars. So how can you engage in a relationship with someone when the cop-out is, I can't tell you that, it's operational, it's black bag, or they would just lie to your face? Like, how can you ever truly know that person? And yet they do seem to know each other really well. They know where the line is, but they are obviously very closely bonded and love each other as well, because they say they would kill for each other. So you don't do that for just anyone.
Yeah, and they say it without blinking. as well, because it's like a
Yes.
close up in her face when saying it, and says she's asking him questions and the camera's focused squarely on him. He's lying on top of her at the time, and she asks him, and there's no hesitation, and he doesn't blink, and he doesn't, the eyes don't move, the traditional, if it goes up to the right, then you're lying, or whatever, that kind of thing. There's no tells. It's just straight down the line. Yes. Yeah. And it's kind of scary as well, the sort of level of commitment there as well. So that really works. Now, surrounding them, we have a very small cast. You're talking about another 4 people that are the main cast, and you've got the Pierce Brosnan character as well, who is slightly outside of this, but intrinsic to the plot. So you don't have an awful lot of people here. So your supporting cast in this have to do a certain amount of heavy lifting, because it's not all George in this film. It does go about with various people. What did you think of them? The fact that these characters are all very different. None of them are the same in any two ways. And there's a lot made of the fact that the other 4 people, they're in relationships as well. And how people question why they're together as well a lot of the time, because they seem so different. So you've got 4 unique different types of personalities. You have a psychologist, you have a sort of data scraper, like she's called, but she's very, very intelligent, very computer expert. You've got this very sort of buttoned down, almost like a George prototype spy. And you've got Freddie, who is a complete fucking mess. He is just... He's at the opposite end. He is your traditional... He's like Jackson Lamb in that sort of respect from Slow Horses.
Yeah.
He's a broken down spy who's been through all, and he's got all sorts of problems with drink, drugs, etc., etc. How did you think that added flavour to the story itself?
I will add before I start that I've no idea what accent Pierce Brosnan is doing in this film. No idea.
Yeah.
I don't know where he's meant to be from, so thankfully he doesn't have too much to say. But yeah, no, I find that dynamic really interesting. Clarissa, in particular, the Marissa Abela character and the data scraper, I found her very interesting because she seemed like she was, again, like quite warm and personable and didn't really know what she wanted out of life. And she obviously had a lot of love for Freddie, but as you've said, he's so broken, and like almost in a way you get the sense that he's sort of been chewed up by the system that he is so embedded in. Like his life is a mess because of the job that he does, and it's created this sort of vicious cycle within him that he obviously lives up to the stereotype really of being the sort of like untrustworthy, solvent fueled spy who's sort of clinging on and having the cliched affair with the much younger colleague in that sense. I thought that Reggie John Page's character was extremely arrogant. The scene in particular with him and Naomi Harris's character where she asks for like a break, essentially. He's like, well, I've already moved on, fucking somebody else, basically. And it's like, oh, you are so up your own arse. Like, but I sort of liked their dynamic in the sense that they were really, whereas George and Catherine sort of had settled into some sort of like domesticity, the James and Zoe characters felt like they were constantly fighting each other to be the best or to be on top or to be the person who was sort of further up the organisation. So their dynamic was really quite fraught from the offset. And obviously, as we all gather around this dinner table, which happens a couple of times in the film, you're in this fancy London house that's like, got like probably like Pharaoh and Ball colours on the wall and this beautifully decorated table with all the tea lights and a really fancy dinner. And then you have people, stabbing their partners in the hand with a fork or, taking the piss out of each other because, the second date was watching somebody else's game. And but the dynamic felt very, very sort of like fraught and intense from the offset. So I loved the fact that all these characters had different jobs because it gave them different things to talk about and different ways to move the story along as well. But yeah, the dynamic is just like, fuck, being part of that friendship group, that just seems too intense.
Yeah, I did like it, and it made for a very good dinner party scene. The fact that there was so much going on that you didn't necessarily need to know. You just needed to know that there was tensions throughout, and the fact that they were in a seemingly social situation, which was not a social situation at all, especially since he'd put DZM5 in the curry in order to get people to open up a little, which is a fictitious truth serum, apparently. It's not a real thing. They made it up for that. But yeah, the fact that they used that, and then he admitted later on he used perhaps just a smidge too much as well, because of the outcomes with the knife through the hand and all this sort of thing. But that dinner scene in itself cemented the ideas behind the film. The fact that they are all professional liars and they can lie even under the influence of a truth serum that they'd all taken, they were still able to lie to a certain extent, especially Freddie, because he was probably because he'd built up a resistance to most.
I was going to say he's probably tolerant to that by now.
Yeah, because even when faced with sort of truths about the fact that he was seeing somebody else in a sexual relationship, he was still plausibly denying it. He was still saying, I've never been with anybody apart from you for the last 18 months and all that. And it's only when George pipped in, yes, this is a hotel you go to, this is when you go, usually on Monday and a Thursday, because you can slip away from meetings and all that sort of stuff. And it's just, you just get a sense that...
you get the sense of George's power, like this notion that he'd like liars, which seems so intrinsic to who he is as a person, means that yes, he would throw his friend and work colleague under the bus and expose him in front of his partner. Like his moral compass is so strong that it doesn't matter that this is a social situation, or it could potentially ruin him professionally. You know, if Freddie were to like go after him or whatever, it doesn't matter to him. His truth is, or the truth rather, is more important to him. Hence why he hosts the world's worst dinner parties.
So, what did you think of the screenplay, and obviously how that cemented in the story? Do you think it worked well? As I've pointed out, we're talking 90 minutes here. We're talking an episode and a half of a TV drama. So do you think it worked particularly well? Do you think it was like kind of tight, or? Yeah,
no, I think it's very dialogue heavy because it's all about these relationships and their dynamics. I think that it's one that you need to keep up with because there's a lot of explanations, names, you know, things going on. You need to understand what Severus is as well. So I do think it's one that you need to actually pay attention to, but that's not a bad thing. That's not criticism at all. I like films that keep your mind ticking over. I do think that other films have maybe done the sort of find the mole thing a bit better, because at times I was a wee bit like, right, can we go on to the next scene here? This feels like just a little bit too much character development, whereas actually I want to know how this is going to end up. But for 90 minutes, no, it's really well paced, because for a lot of people, when they think of a spy film, they are thinking more similar to The Amateur. They're thinking all these different locations, lots of tippy taps on computers, where this is not. This is really about people and the dynamic between, you know, certain relationships, be it collegiate, friendship, or like a life partner, whatever you want to call it. So I do think it is quite tight. The one thing I will complain about is that there was definitely not enough Gustav Skarsgård in this film. Like, genuinely devastated that he was only in it for about 5 minutes total. But apart from that, I thought it was very well done.
I think you're kind of pushing it even with the 5 minutes.
I know, actually, that might be being generous,
yeah. Another case of what the actual fuck, why are you doing this with actors who really know their stuff and are very, very good. So, but you just don't know. It could be a favour for something. It could be, you know, just...
Maybe it was a bigger part when it was initially filmed, or just the chance to work with Steven Soderbergh. You've no idea. But it did seem like a really, again, a sort of waste of a big name, because he's literally given about 3 lines. But nonetheless, you know, still enjoyed it.
Initially, when this film was written, it was set in Washington, D.C., in the spy environments there. But they changed it because there have been so many spy dramas set in that sort of arena in one form or another over the years, so they've moved it to London, which again, we've kind of seen quite a number of those as well. But do you think it benefited from the fact that it was London-centric rather than Washington?
It does make things a very interesting dynamic, because I think the dynamic, if it had been an American cast, I would say that Americans, and this is like a sweeping stereotype, tend to be sort of more outgoing. Professional courtesies are like a bigger thing. British people, I'm not saying they're rude, but they are, I would say, a bit more direct. So it brings a different sort of balance to things as well. And also, British people would say like they'd had a lovely time at your house and then go home and rip you to shreds and say like the sandwiches were shit and all that. So in a way, maybe we are all professional liars. So it does add a sort of different edge to things, because the sort of cultural stereotypes are very, very different between the two. So that does make it like interesting, in the sense that it obviously had a plan to be American set, but you can't really, like, this is a sort of like, you know, everyone is sort of, you know, professionally aggressive, I guess you would say, and very to the point, and obviously climbing all over each other for career. And that obviously will happen within like the American counterpart as well, but I just think they're maybe a bit better at hiding it. I think British people are a bit more sharp and a bit more direct.
Yeah, I think the sort of history of spy and espionage drama within Britain is quite strong. So setting it here within this sort of environment kind of works very nicely, because there, like I say, there is a sort of British sensibility about it being a game and everything as well. They talk about the game, you know, all this sort of stuff. So it's almost as if it's not treated as seriously. It's treated more slightly, but it's not, because it's life and death, and they understand there are, you know, real world consequences for all of this. So it does, I think it benefits from the fact that British personalities are more sort of closed. Like it says, they're not as outgoing. I think it really works, and that's perfect for people who are professional liars as well. I really do enjoy that. Now, I should say that the term black bag, which is the title of the film, relates to what you cannot talk about. So if you're speaking to somebody and, like, for instance, George and Catherine are having a conversation and he says, you know, do you want to go to the cinema? And she says, well, I'm away on Wednesday. And he says, oh, where are you going? And she says, black bag. And it's basically what you can't talk about. You put it in a black bag and you're throwing away, not to be discussed. So, and partly that was made up as well. It wasn't a term that it's not actually.
Oh, really? I was convinced that was a proper spy term, because that would make sense. Like,
it totally does, yes. But no, it was one that was just made up for the film, which I found quite interesting.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, with the character of Catherine, do you think she was too glamorous to be a spy in that sort of sense?
Do you know, it's funny you say that, because the scene where she goes for the drop in Zurich and she's like perfectly coiffured, her hair's got a slight wave to it, and she's in like this gorgeous, like, I think it's like a long leather skirt and like a nice coat and some boots. Yeah. And I thought, do you know what? It's funny. See, since we've watched Argylle, I keep going back to that scene on the train where it's like, spies aren't glamorous. Like, they don't look like Henry Cavill. They look like, you know, somebody that you don't suspect. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because that did cross my mind when she was going for that drop. I was like, you almost look too glam to be doing this. Whereas you imagine, like, again, a bit like The Amateur, a lot of it is maybe more hanging around toilets in Marseille as opposed to, you know, luxury locations and the fancy boots to go with it. So that did cross my mind a couple of times, but it kind of plays into her wardrobe is sort of reflective of the character, I guess, whereas George is the thick glasses, the tight coats, the tight polo necks, because he's quite a clipped and reserved person, whereas her wardrobe's a little bit more outgoing, a bit like herself. So I guess there's some character reflection there, but yes, it did make me think that she looked a bit too glamorous to be doing an incognito drop in the park.
Yeah, I did like the contrast between her and George in terms of how they dressed. They both dressed very, very well, and she was more flamboyantly, like, say, with big sunglasses, and just she's projecting an image, and, like, say, spends an awful lot of money on jewelry and things, which was mentioned, the fact that she was concerned about money and he wasn't concerned about money in the same way, and wealth and all that. So that was almost like a wee sort of divide between the two of them, whereas George seemed to be more like your classic British spy master. You're looking at
George Smiley.
George Smiley came to me very much. The way that he's buttoned down and he doesn't give anything away if he doesn't have to, and also the Michael Caine character in the Harry Palmer films.
Oh yes,
big thick glasses, and he did all his own cooking as well, and he had a very sort of particular style about him as well, and it kind of fitted. And I believe they talked about the character of George in this film being sort of a Michael Caine type, maybe slightly later, with there was like sort of Savile Row suits and all this, and it was traditional, but it wasn't boring. It's quite elegant, and you saw that with the character of Arthur as well, the Pierce Brosnan character. He was very well dressed. He would wear, you know, very sort of fitted suits and everything, and he was very understated, but you knew there was a lot of money put into the
not a hair out of
place.
Definitely.
So let's talk about some of the scenes then. So let's talk about, well, there's two scenes that mirror each other. There are the scenes in the psychiatrist's office where the psychiatrist is leading it and they're all having conversations back and forth with her, and there is an interrogation scene with a lie detector which follows a similar sort of back and forth, different people saying different things. That George is obviously involved in that. We'll start with the psychiatrist scenes. What did you think about that and how that all kind of played in and developed the plot?
So I do think it's interesting because the character of Zoe has a complete overview of everyone else. Now obviously George does as well because he's surveilling everyone else, but she maybe has it from a more personal sense. Like, she knows their ambitions, their fears, their reaction to work that they've been doing. Catherine in particular is hostile to the therapy sessions. Like, she makes it clear that she doesn't want to be there, and James, you just get the impression he thinks he's above all of this because he's young and attractive and on the up, so why does he need sort of therapy sessions? But it's interesting in that it definitely gives her, the character of Zoe, a little bit of a power dynamic over the rest of them, because she does have that insight into them. So, and of course it's set in this sort of like sweeping office. Like her office is literally enormous. It's got, you know, all like floor to ceiling windows. There's lots of natural daylight coming in. So, and it's quite a neutrally toned office. So there's nowhere for them to hide necessarily. Like they are very exposed when they're sitting down next to her. And of course it's face to face. Although there is a bit of a distance between the chairs, it is still quite intense. So I thought they were really well executed. And again, nice to see a female character being given that position where she was in control or was trying to be in control of the conversation or leading the dynamic, and doubtful of everyone else. Like as she says to Catherine, like the pills that you're taking are just under the legal limit for me to raise a flag, so you know exactly what you're doing here. So you know she's good at her job, she's very thorough. So yeah, I really liked those scenes because I thought it just sort of fleshed out the characters a little bit, because that was the one room in the building where they could be honest, let's say, and not all of them took advantage of that.
Yep. It's interesting because in real life they do have psychiatrists and psychologists employed in these services to give, for that very reason, to give them the chance to actually speak to somebody so they don't feel as if they have to go outside and something may slip if they're drunk or whatever. It was quite a telling fact that she actually found out about service through her partner being completely drunk, but he trusted her enough because there was that confidentiality between them in professional terms. So yes, I really liked that. I thought those scenes worked really well. The fact that it was face to face as well was very telling, because in the interrogation scenes with the lie detector, George sits behind.
I know. So intense.
Did you think that, obviously you thought that worked well? Why did you think it worked well?
Because I felt like I was on the bloody hook for what was going on. Like it was, but again, it was so revealing of their characters. Like the fact that Clarissa was controlling her breath and literally clenching her arsehole in order to beat the lie detector, because he obviously catches her out doing it because he asks her a basic question and she gets away with lying to it. That in itself was insane. It was like he's sitting behind them, literally breathing down their neck. You've got all these really intense close-ups as everyone lies their way or tries to lie their way through this. But of course, there's so much information that they can't reveal because it's still under, you know, black bag, despite the fact that they're hooked up to these machines. I just thought it was so well done. And of course, it leads into that sort of like final dinner table gathering. But I just thought it was an excellent piece of tension. Like you knew that all of these characters were so good, as we've said, at lying, that how were they ever going to get round this polygraph? But of course, there are ways to do it, as Clarissa's character shows. So I thought it was brilliant. I really, really enjoyed that. I thought as tension goes, like I felt ill watching it. It was obviously, it's nothing to do with me, but it just made you feel like, oh shit, this is really, like he is going for this here. And you kind of felt like that George would be relentless. Like he would not accept whatever, if he thought the results were slightly skewed in any way, he would do it all over again. That's how rigorous he was and how, you know, keen he was to get to the truth. So yeah, I thought that was a masterclass in building up tension. Yeah,
it really worked, and it kind of led quite nicely into the final dinner scene as well, which the payoff from the interrogations informed the very sort of final act, the final big act of it. So I did really like that. I also like the fact that George was never in a situation where he was having to open up to the psychiatrist. He was not. He was the only one that didn't have meetings, probably because he was completely outside of that whole arena, I suppose. But yes, I did think that worked really, really well, and it was really tense as well, because he was asking the same questions of different people, and you didn't know who was actually going to be the one answering it. And it also reinforced the fact that there are no stupid people in this film either. Everybody is really, really clever. They all know how to deal with the polygraph, and up to a certain extent, if they've got nothing to hide, then that's fine. Nothing will come of it, but if they do have something to hide, they've got techniques that they can use. Again, nobody did anything stupid there. There was no wee slip.
There was no visible beads of sweat or anything like that. Everyone was just cool and like,
So yes, I thought that worked so well. I just really enjoyed it. Now, obviously that led into the final dinner scene where the first thing that somebody says is this a new carpet? Which kind of sets up the whole scene for you. You just kind of go, well, this isn't going to end well. And they talk about that, George and Catherine talk about that a couple of times when they're setting up the initial meeting with everybody, and she says, is it going to get messy? And he says, well, I do hope so, you know, because that's kind of what gets his juices flowing more than anything else. And it's repeated, I think, she says it rather than him saying it about it getting messy the
Yeah.
second time round. Do you think the final scene, the payoff, was merited from everything you saw before?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like an Agatha Christie. At this point, it's all leading to that final gather everyone in a room and I'm going to tell you exactly who's done it and how I know they've done it. So it did feel like that, which again is a little bit sort of like comfort and familiarity because we are sort of, you know, we love that format, we know that format. So I thought it was great. And the fact that they all agreed to go back to his house, one after the worst dinner party ever in the opener, and two after he's just had you hooked up to a polygraph, and yet you're still going, he must make a really good curry, is all I'll say, because they were still going back down for dinner. But yeah, I mean, it all leads to this point. And of course, as I said, this is a film that you really have to pay attention to in terms of character and, you know, plot development and stuff like that. So you want the resolution, you want the answer. So it all leads up to this, and it's got this sort of like a sort of gathering energy that's sort of building up throughout the film. So by the time you get these people in the room for the final time, you assume the tension is like palpable because you assume that it's somebody in that room has been the mole, has been the leap. But going into it, I still didn't know who it was. I had no idea how that, a bit like The Amateur, I had no idea how that was going to end at all. So the payoff is it's phenomenal, actually.
Yep, same. I would like to say that I knew who it was, but it could have been any of them. And it was only just like with that, you're wondering why I brought you all here together.
Yeah.
You know, the ending where they did actually explain things, and there was only one person who was not really involved at all, which I found quite surprising. Obviously there was various things going on at the time as well. So yeah, I thought the payoff was excellent from everything that led up to it. It made sense to me, and I like the fact that you brought up the fact that you have to watch this. This is not a film that you can watch casually, because if you watch it casually, you will be completely lost after about 30 minutes, because you'll be saying, why are they doing? Why are they having a meeting there? You know, why are they doing this? What's he talking about? You know, what's Cerberus? That kind of thing. So, yeah, it was one that you needed to pay attention to, but I think it paid off particularly well, and it didn't outstay its welcome either, which is obviously nice indeed. Interesting wee bit that I found when I was reading up on this. Cate Blanchett, as preparation for her role, tried to get people to speak to her about spycraft and you know, working on that. She couldn't find anybody at a certain level because, and this makes perfect sense, they're not going to talk about what they do.
Yeah.
So she couldn't get people to actually give her background in the way that she was looking for it, and somebody who's at that sort of level within an organisation, because it just says, nah. No,
and I imagine that even if you've retired, you're probably under some sort of NDA for the rest of your life to never talk about what you actually did or what you were involved in, because I'm not saying that everybody at high levels doing like super shady stuff, but there will be a level of, you know, your interest is to protect the British public or British security or whatever, and therefore you're just never allowed to talk about this. So I'm not surprised that she came up against the wall of silence, actually. Official
Secrets Act, that's what that is.
Yeah.
It's when you start in these jobs, you sign the Official Secrets Act, and you're bound to it for life. There's no expiration period. Yeah. When I worked in IT for the police, on my first day, I signed the Official Secrets Act. And before I left, I signed the Official Secrets Act again, because it's a reminder that you are bound by this. And that's kind of standard practice. It's just to remind you may be leaving this organisation, but you do not talk about anything. Now, in my case, it's obviously very minor. It's just like criminal records and stuff like that. It wasn't. But if it wasn't, would I tell you? You know. So.
Well, that's it. You could be a super spy, and I wouldn't know anything about it.
Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting as well. Yeah. So, would you recommend this movie?
Yeah, listen, it probably wasn't as slick maybe as I'd hoped in terms of like, I did prefer The Amateur to this. However, it's tight, it's great performances. It's one of these films that makes you sit up and pay attention, and there's a great cast. So yeah, I definitely would recommend it. I think I'm also a big fan of like the sort of slow jazz, like soft hi-hat soundtrack that was going on throughout that. Made it feel very moody and suave. So yeah.
I forgot to mention the soundtrack. It was done by David Holmes, who is a Northern Irish producer. He's worked with Steven Soderbergh a number of times. He did the Ocean's films with him, and he's done other work with them as well. His soundtrack works phenomenal because he invokes this sort of smoky, jazzy, 60-ish kind of thing, and it works very well in these type of films, like caper films and spy films. It's good to have this sort of lots of percussion and things like that. So it
makes you want to have a cigar and a whiskey and a nice high back leather chair, doesn't it?
Yeah, you want one of those whiskey glasses that it's like a solid base to it and it comes up. It's like you see it in Mad Men and like a big blob of ice on it. Yeah, it's the kind of thing you're looking for. For myself, yes, I would definitely recommend this movie. I think it's kind of up there with the best that I've seen this year. It's in contention, I think, for sort of top 10. Not the best film, but yeah, I really did enjoy it, and I think I've seen it twice now, so I enjoyed it thoroughly the second time as well. I was really taken with it. I like the low key nature of it and the fact that there's not a lot, doesn't seem to be a lot happening, and there's nothing in the way of actually. There's one explosion in this whole film, and it could just quite as easily have been, there was an explosion. They didn't actually need to show it at all. Yeah. Clearly, it did not. It makes no odds. It's fine. But yes, I would definitely recommend this movie. So there we go. So that is us for today. We have reviewed another couple of films and enjoyed them, which is good, because what's the point of watching movies unless you're going to enjoy them? Yeah. So you can find us at all the normal social media outlets. We have a presence on the majority of them. If you want to send us an email, it's podcast@moviescramble.co.uk. We obviously do have a website as well, moviescramble.co.uk. Mary, you've just put up a review of Weapons on there, which was very good. I'm thoroughly looking forward to watching that film, and I suspect I will get a chance to see it while you're off for a couple of weeks, so we'll maybe be discussing that in the future. So from myself, I will see you the next time. Cheerio.
Bye.